Welcome, welcome, everyone. Hey, Tom and Ruth, or no, sorry, Tom and Cathy. I see you're both on air. Thank you. Would you check to make sure that you're both megaphoned, please?
All right, I am megaphone now.
Excellent.
Woohoo.
Awesome.
Okay, Tom, give me some heavy
I'm
breathing.
It looked extremely rocky for the Mudville 9 that day.
All
Was
right.
grilling in the
Hey,
slidey
everyone,
toes.
welcome. Oh, Ruth, welcome. Come
Hello.
on in, join the party. Ruth, will you
Hi.
please check to make sure that you are megaphoned and on air?
Uh, yes. Done.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Hi, Ruth.
Hello,
Hang that one
everyone.
up in the sky. Right on, right on. Well, we got a couple of more minutes before the time really starts, but I want to appreciate everyone for taking the time to be here for this UniVirtual event with extra special thanks to educators in VR and the Virtual World Society, and of course, my awesome selection of panelists here. I have gratitude for all of you being here today. One of the things about running virtual events is, checking to make sure that there's no technical issues, and I think that we're doing great. Some people have noticed that the world is like a little heavy or a little glitchy, so so that is it's a reported thing. It's probably not you. But I do also want to respect everyone's time, including our panelists here, and so I'm going to begin. Once again, thank you all for taking the time this afternoon to be here, or or the morning or evening, depending on where in the world your headset or keyboard is located. So, will you please give yourself a round of applause? I would really appreciate practicing using those emojis. I appreciate you all very much. And I definitely, as I mentioned before at the top, maybe before everyone got here, educators in VR, Don McT, Laurel, the entire educators in VR team, and the Virtual World Society. Thank you so much for hosting this event, putting it together, and it is not a light amount of work. One of the things that I remember is I used to work at a creperie right on the side of the street in Seattle, and we had a tip jar, and the boss wrote on it, "It's hard work making this look easy," and that it could not be truer for virtual reality events. It is extremely hard work to make it look easy. So thank you all again for being here, and thank you, Laurel and MT, at all. So without further ado, let me introduce myself. My name is Drew Stone. I have the AltspaceVR username here, Druffin. Feel free to call me Drew or Druffin. And I run a virtual reality events company called Locusium. And I've worked with some of these people before with Locusium, but I've also really appreciated the types of events they do separately from the work that we've been doing together. And so I'm really pleased to have them here today. And if you wouldn't mind going down the line on introducing yourself, Ruth, would you please first?
Sure. So, hi, everyone. My name is Ruth Diaz, and I am an organizational consultant. I teach conflict resiliency and have been group facilitator in physical reality for probably around 10 years. Big passion of mine is what I call group creatures. And I've been happy to discover that in virtual reality, they also exist, actually in more maybe impulsive formats often, but that also makes it more passionate and interesting. So I've been doing some events in AltSpace and also in Horizon over the last year that have been centering diverse voices and talking about conflict and virtual reality culture. You can look at my website at vrcreateconnect.com, and I'm really happy to be here.
Wonderful. I'm glad to have you. Cathy, would you mind?
Sure. I'm Cathy Moya, and I work at Microsoft, although I do not work in the Altspace group. I work on a product called Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which is enterprise network management, and I'm on a customer experience engineering team. So my job is getting my customers and my engineers to talk to each other so that we can build the best possible products. And usually that involves getting people together for events. So my team would usually throughout the year be bringing hundreds of people directly into Redmond or into our Cambridge, Massachusetts office. And Thank you.
Oh,
So, I would be doing things like bringing, our MVPs, our most valued professionals would usually come. And it was actually how I kind of found AltSpace as I was talking about, gee, I wish I had a kind of virtual environment with avatars that we could bring people in and have the conversations that you don't get when you're just trying to do things on video. And I just didn't know about AltSpace at that point. So I'm mostly a hardcore 2D user. I still love the experience in here, and I try to bring a lot of people in. I also run a public meetup for what I call #WomenITPros. It's a side thing that I did that's somewhat in relation to my job, about trying to look at the many ways that women can be technical rather than over-indexing on, oh, well, you got to have a STEM degree, or if you're not coding, why are you in tech? Because there's so many things, including virtual reality. And so that's just a public meetup that I do on the fourth Fridays that everybody is welcome to. You don't have to be a woman or an IT pro to come to.
Definitely recommended that event, by the way. Check it out. Thank you very much, Ashley. And Tom, would you please introduce yourself?
Introducing myself as Tom, semi-old guy who had a long career in media, mostly video and multimedia type of presentations. But I'm not just me. I'm actually deeply embedded in a community in VR, mostly in AltSpace now, but also living in Discord and other places. I called it Evolver, that my son started over 3 years ago. So there's a community that's lasted for over 3 years in VR, has grown a lot during the pandemic. And I specifically host events on topics that we don't talk about enough because it's very difficult, perhaps, in the other world, things like mortality, bereavement. And I also lead several meditations. So we have altogether 11 meditation leaders in our Evolver community. So I'm kind of representing myself in a whole community that does events like this.
Excellent, excellent. Well, actually, Tom, since you seem to have a little bit of the momentum and you gave me such positive feedback on these questions, let me turn the first one to you. What kind of VR events have you done, and which type of virtual events are you interested in exploring in the future?
Yeah, and by asking that question, you start to ask us to create a taxonomy, a classification system of VR events, which is probably not even agreed upon. And when I started to look over the data from our events in the Evolver community, I started to group them into meditations, which are, in my opinion, a social experience, including both what we think of as a meditation where people are being meditative, but then a check-in afterwards. That's just kind of an inherent part of the meditation experience. And that's what makes, I think, live meditation events in VR quite a bit different than all the meditation apps, which can be very beneficial, but don't have that social connection. But then a second category would be meetups, is kind of the term that's used here in AltSpace. And that's what I call the just kind of free-form discussions that we have about, again, topics that are difficult to talk about in the real world, particularly things that we've lost now. And then a third category would be parties. There's lots of parties in VR, and our community has its parties. And they're kind of semi-hosted. I wouldn't say I host a party, but we certainly have those events. And then the fourth thing, so it's 4 different categories. I mentioned this earlier when I was talking with you, is we have circles where a group of 5, 6, 7 people have agreed to come together for 90 minutes for a 12-week period and have discussions not about therapy and not about the weather, somewhere in between. Now, there's a topic to talk about, but the point is to get to know each other. And that's a different kind of event. So there's 4 different styles right there. I'll put those out on the table and give you the megaphone back.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Well, coming back down the line, either Cathy or Ruth, do you want to jump in? What of the VR events have you done, and what would you look to do in the future to kind of like stress your edge?
Well, so the Women IT Pros is very much a mixer event. I've toyed with the idea of trying to do a little bit more structured conversation at those events, but it just kind of depends on who's showing up there. So it can be a little bit, mix and match. And I'd say generally what I'm doing right now is more the mixer and social type events. I have thought about trying to do more content presentation events. I think the web projector in here has been getting a little bit more stable, so I might be willing to try that, although I've still seen some groups struggle with that a bit. The other reason that I've held back a bit on doing a lot of content in virtual reality is because of the accessibility issues. And I don't want to be presenting something that is perceived as an integral part of a program when it's not going to be accessible to everybody who might want to come to it. So I'm still kind of, grappling with that a little bit and looking for ways around that. And in the meantime, I've done things like for our Microsoft Most Valued Professionals, or MVPs, just a couple of weeks ago, I did a bunch of social parties, because normally when they come to Redmond, it's not just about all the content we're giving them. It's about being able to hang out and have conversations. So, a lot of things bringing them in together with that. I also did, after Ignite in September, I did a bit of a virtual expo in Verbella using their glorious expo hall. And I had some people from my team there, actually staffing some virtual booths. And it was so amazing because, I had a bunch of people who had never been in VR before. I think maybe one person out of my, 10 people had a VR headset. And I didn't really even have to do anything to teach them how to work the booth. I just had to kind of say, look, here's how you walk and talk, and there's the booth. And, it's lovely how much of an analog this is to real life once you can get people in here.
Interesting.
Great comments. Ruth,
Yeah.
what have you done, and what are you looking forward to doing as far as virtual reality events?
Thanks. Yeah. I would maybe add one more category to Tom's taxonomy, which is that in a different application, Horizon, which is still in beta, we sometimes will have meetings where we are actually building worlds while talking together. So you can have up to 4 people in a world at a time, and sometimes we'll make regular kind of appointments to play together, but also to have really meaningful, important discussions. So within that realm, I've led groups of people who have created diversity inclusive worlds that are representing minority voices. And that has been such an integration of my playfulness and my artistic skills with my facilitation and my very purposeful work in anti-racism and inclusivity. I think in AltSpace, there's a really great opportunity for those cross-medium platform pieces where people can come in on their cell phone or their laptop. And so I definitely recently have been branching over into AltSpace to host some different groups and have conversations again about conflict resiliency. So for example, I'm forgetting his name already, but we just had someone in here yelling at Cathy. Sorry about that, Cathy. And what happens in cultural spaces where that happens regularly is we just stop talking about it. We just kind of like block people and keep them going. And it's hard sometimes to recognize what the cultural shift can be in a group if we have those missing conversations. So in my groups, if you'd like to come, I am, I'm talking with people who are doing those behaviors and learning where that happy medium is, because again, if it's a public space and lots of people coming in, that can be really disruptive. But I like being curious about the opportunities to have real connection, including conflict, even in virtual reality. So I think my growth edge is actually going to be within a space like this where it's mostly just talking, to try going to a party. That's one thing I don't think I've ever done. And just learning how to schmooze in VR. Like, yeah, so that's me.
Great. Well, I have been to events that all of you have done before, and I say that they are successful events. I feel good as a participant to attend, but I wanted popcorn style. Anyone can answer. What is one of the hallmarks of a high quality VR event that you produce or that you attend?
Before I'll say something about that, but I also want to say to Ruth, just to make our little thing even more of a conversation, is that, first of all, I think there's a lot more elements in the taxonomy, but there's a relationship. I don't do very well at parties either. The meetups that I do are very structured. But if you hang out with people in a thing like the circles and get to know them a little better, then you can actually go up to them at a party and say hi and feel confident doing that. So actually these types of events, I think, work together in ways that we haven't even, begun to figure out yet. And so for me, the hallmarks of a quality event have to do with participation. I mean, that's what I'm. People have different reasons. I mean, if it's presentation and someone just wants to transmit information, that would be, you'd have different goals, I suppose. But my goals are to get people involved, and I like it the best when there's a lot of different ages. I like to do morning events where I am on the Pacific coast, so it's possible to have people in the evening in Western Europe. So you get people from all around the world, and I was thinking of a metric, Drew, that you could even use for that, and it would be that we get data on how many people attend, and we also get data on what the average peak attendance is. And the closer those two numbers are, that means you kept a lot of people engaged. Yeah, just a thought.
That's a great point. Great point. Yeah, we these are hard numbers, quantifiable, but especially for virtual events, there's people we feel as we come together. So actually, Ruth, I want to put this to you because I think that I've heard you mention something like this about what a successful event is for you is when you feel in a particular way after the event. Do you know what I'm talking about? Would you care to expand?
Yeah. And this just actually came up in a couple of conversations recently. So when I go into facilitating or holding space for an event, I'm looking for where my energy is in my body and my emotions when I walk into it and where it's at the end. And that's kind of my first very basic measurement of how the event went. If I'm less energy or super hyped up, then that's not necessarily a sustainable event cycle. There's variations with that, of course. But then the other piece is noticing other people's body language and their feedback at the end. Have the voice tones been kind of lessened? Are people talking faster or slower? And that doesn't necessarily mean, again, a good or bad thing, but just noticing that there is a shift and a change, and then watching how those either lend to the same people showing up next time or less people. Every, what I call, again, a group creature is different. But my first measure is always asking, am I walking away with a little bit more energy than I came in with? And that's my measure of success. And then also looking for that kind of feedback from other people so that we're not walking away too confused or drained or just uncertain about whatever is going to happen next. Those kinds of things, I believe, create, attrition and lower success over time.
Yeah.
Cathy, care to weigh in?
Yeah, so I'm dealing with kind of a different population. I think most people come in and they find AltSpace through, whatever VR headset they're using. And what I'm really trying to do is bring 2D people in to have the kind of experiences that we can't get in standard video conferencing like Teams. So my sites have actually been pretty low in bringing people in here. So my first event that I did with customers was the Verbella Expo. And my success criteria was, can I get 80% of the people in the world who actually want to get into the world and have them have at least one good conversation? And I don't think that I necessarily raised my bar that much above it. So when I was bringing in all those MVPs, I did 6 one-hour sessions. And the thought was that we'd spend maybe 15, 20 minutes starting in teams so that I could get their names because we were using groups to control entry. So it would just be MVPs. And then, after that, everybody would be in the alt space having fun. And most of the time, I was in the Teams meeting for the majority of the hour, working out issues with groups. The event wasn't showing up. They gave us the wrong name. They gave us the display name instead of the username. And so, it's been a bit of a battle just getting people in. And then, I had other people in there who are helping them do the walking and talking thing. But, I did have some people who loved it so much that they came back to all 6 events I did, even though these were people who were maybe in Europe or in Asia Pacific, who were coming in at 2 a.m. because they loved the experience so much. So that I consider a success.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, there's a
Beautifully
commonality with the 3 of us about that relationship building, and that there's a quality of connection and involvement that predicts people are going to come back. They're getting enough meaning out of it that they don't want to switch to Zoom or go do all the other many times free or competing meetings that would be in the same spot. Yeah.
Well,
That's cool.
my next query that I've offered to you guys before, actually, I want to bring it back to you, Cathy, first. Since you have a more particular style of what you're trying to do as a more narrow focus, I wanted to ask, and I'll ask all of you, of course, what are the ways that you like to structure your events so that they're programmatic? And then where do you like to allow fluidity or deviance, either in the flow of the event or after the event? Can you reflect on that?
Mhm. Yeah, so what I found in bringing in people who have no experience in VR is I really need to start wherever they are. And I would say, this is not just true of VR. I went to a social, well, kind of a convention for a group that I belong to that was just in one of the, it used Zoom, but it had a platform around it. It was Socio, I think, as the platform. And these were a bunch of people who were very non-technical. And a lot of them just freaked the heck out trying to get into the Socio stuff so that they could then get into the Zoom meetings. And so what I realized is, we do all of our meetings in Zoom. We should have started with a Zoom meeting as a lobby. So, if you're doing Zoom, if you're doing, whatever, WebEx, for me, it would be Teams primarily. I start in there. I get people so they know what they need to do. I get them to install the app because, typical corporate culture is, at least in the groups I'm in, you send out the invite and people don't read it, so they show up to the event not knowing, oh, I was supposed to install something, oh, I should have gone in and done the tutorial in advance. I just plan for that. So if I'm going to do an hour-long kind of social event, I'm figuring the first 20 minutes is just the onboarding, and then maybe I would start any programmer speaking at the half hour, and then kind of in that 20 minutes. I haven't actually done this yet, but at some point, probably trying to do something like Simon Says, I think is a great icebreaker, because especially if I keep it to things, the 2D people can do, like, okay, spin around. And then you can also start showing people some of the tools. It's a learning and kind of a game experience. Then have a little bit of program and then have social time. I went to the 20th anniversary party for SharePoint, which they did in AltspaceVR, and they had fantastic content. But I felt one of the things that they did was it was a little bit too much content, and there wasn't enough of just the socializing. So I think that's a really important part that I need to think about. If I'm going to structure an event, I need to make sure that people have the informal spot so they can have those serendipitous connection, even if there is content we're delivering.
Beautifully put. Tom or Ruth, care to share about? Actually, Tom, you mentioned that you run your events actually pretty line by line each time. Where do you allow some leniency or flow from your event?
Well, and when I was thinking about that question, it's really both, structured and unstructured at the same time. It's a quantum thing because, as we said, these events are nonlinear. You can't now in a situation, that you're describing, Cathy. It's different. It's people's job, and they're supposed to show up on time and whatnot. The type of stuff that I've done, people, they'll drop in halfway in the event. There's no shame associated with that. I mean, it's not like going to the opera where they won't let you in if you're late, kind of thing. So like you're saying, assuming people haven't done the stuff, you just have to assume, that a half an hour in, someone just arrived that has no idea what's going on, and actually might have just come to VR for the first time that minute. So that's what I always assume. And so I constantly reset the scene. My events are really simple. Saying goodbye is what it's about. I just say over and over again in different voices that we've all lost a lot. And it's sometimes hard to talk about that. And this is a place where you can do it. Just like that. People get it really fast. I bet I say that 15 to 20 times in an hour. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but a lot. And then also I call on people. And I could talk for a long time about calling on people, but I'll just say that is the structure is that I don't think crosstalk works very well. If someone says something and someone else wants to actually say something right to them, I ask them to raise their hand and I'll call on them and they'll say the thing, to that person. But crosstalk gets out of control pretty fast. And I also think people love to be called on. There's a small subset of the population, and I'm one of them, that doesn't mind just talking. Most people feel that raising my hand says, I've got something uniquely special. I'm really special, and we're taught not to do that. So it actually liberates people to call on them. But you also have to genuinely say, if they say, I don't want to talk, fine, I'm really glad that you're here. Just to be here because that's participating too, and you have to mean that when you say it. So there's a few things I'll throw out on structure. I'll think of a million more later, but you can gnash on them.
Perfect for a blog post.
Yeah.
Tom, in addition to running events, Tom is also a blogger that documents VR events and kind of like VR culture for growth in education. So, so follow up with Tom after the event, and I think in the schedule they've got a URL for his blog. Please do check it out. Interesting stuff. Ruth, do you care to share anything?
Yeah, well, I just always want to compliment you, Tom, and I learn so much from your wisdom of exactly what you do, but also like I just feel the warmth in how you even recount the story of validating people in their choice to share, and also really making space and inviting them and saying, basically by calling on somebody, I'm telling you, you belong here. And whatever your decision is in sharing or not sharing, participating or not participating, belonging in virtual reality is so important. It's a interesting paradox to be in here on purpose and yet be using a medium that up until recently was majority gaming escape, kind of being less on purpose in the world kind of focus. So I appreciate that warmth so much, Tom. And I would say that there's different avatars, different platforms, and especially in AltSpace. I think my first a couple years ago when I came in, I was so amazed because, as you can see, I move around a lot. I was so amazed at everybody's very upright posture where they had their hands down all the time. And I was just like, wow, people are really formal here. And it literally was probably a month before I started to realize, like, oh, most of you can't move your hands. And it was such an aha moment for me as far as the culture goes. And then also, if you're not moving your hands and you nod your head, that's just one sign that like you're really into this. You actually had to like move your mouse or use your arrow button. Or I haven't done PCs very much with this, so I'm not sure if that's how you do it. But that effort of body language is different. So if I'm working with a crowd and people are in some way showing me any body language, even if they're just facing me when I move the room, that's telling me there's an engagement. And if I'm presenting content, I can keep going with that. But if I start seeing people kind of leave or get restless or not be responding as quickly, even in virtual reality, that's a sign that we need to slow down, check in, maybe create space like Cathy's saying for some, serendipitous connection, and get the content, on pause at least for a bit so we can feel our humanity again. So a lot of wisdom between you two. I feel like a baby up here comparatively as far as VR events go, but I'm always pleasantly surprised to see how much physical reality is actually carrying forward in VR. It's just slightly different language here and there depending on the application.
Beautifully stated. Beautifully stated. Knowledge from these people. Can you believe it? I'm gonna do some applause. Join me if you choose. Well, and actually drawing off of that, virtual events, are an extension in some ways more than others of real physical events that we are more used to, and the way that we adapt our physical events is based on what kind of mess we made when we did the event, but also the feedback from participants. So I wanted to ask, what are the ways that you hear and integrate feedback for adapting or improving your events for your audiences? What do those communication channels look like, and then how are they actioned upon in your events? Anyone can hop in.
Well, this is one where I also have, because of my audience, a much more built-in structure. I think it's pretty accepted and expected that at a professional event, you don't get out of there till somebody tries to shove an eval in your hands. And the return rates aren't great, but it is just part of the overall experience. And including for our big Microsoft Ignite conference, we have digital evals that we ask people to fill out. It's hit or miss. Generally you get the people who are complaining more coming back for those. But I did, since the way that I structured my MVP event recently, I did actually get evals for that because they were on the official schedule as MVP sessions, not, it's just some kind of social event. And so just overall, the feedback was really positive. Most of the feedback that I've dealt with, it has to do with getting people in world in the first place. And, and the comments that I got bore that out is pretty much as I expected. But one thing that I was thinking of, you were talking about, the physical and the virtual and all of that. And sometimes I also find that, if I say we're going to do this event in AltSpace, people kind of assume that just being in AltSpace is enough. And it's like, no, you actually have to do the event. You have to have the content in there. It's not just enough novelty to come in here. And, because otherwise, they're going to give feedback. They're going to get in here. They're going to look around. They're going to say, okay, well, that's it. And I'm bored and pop out. And so I also did get feedback on my first event. That was actually one of the things I learned of that Verbella event was, I had a good start on content, but I really needed more of a program, more of an agenda in there. So evals, surveys.
Gotcha. And then do you iterate, Cathy, actually, if you don't mind, what's your timeline to receiving the feedback to making changes in an event that you might have scheduled within the next day or two?
So for the MVP Summit, I did 6 events. I did 2 on Sunday, 2 on Tuesday, 2 on Wednesday. So my onboarding deck changed. Now, partly that was because that was the week that they announced the new title screen in AltSpace. So I had to completely redo the onboarding flow I was using to take people through. And then we had the event codes. And we went, what's an event code now? But yeah, I mean, I also have done a lot of improv. I'm pretty happy and pretty comfortable just switching things up on the fly. But generally my big events, like it's going to be until March of next year before I do another MVP Summit. But I might try to do some other MVP events in the meantime. And, I'll just take that feedback. I'll probably do a lot more programming now in the events. Now that I've got some MVPs in there and used to it, now I would offer more, structure or, more guided conversations probably.
Cool, thank you. And sorry, Tom, I didn't mean to interrupt there. Were you ready to weigh in?
No, it's okay. I was actually coughing a little bit too, but anyway, it's a really hard question, Drew, and because I really think that yes, there's a continuity to the analog world, but we're really inventing new forms here, and it's tough to give feedback. It's like they say if Henry Ford had asked for feedback when he was building the things about transportation, people would have said, "Give me a faster horse." And it's hard to kind of visualize, what we should be doing next and how we could be improving on this stuff. And I don't want to sound like it's not important and like our intuitive ability to read things is always right. But I think one of the distinctive features of the type of events that I've been doing is that they're very personal. And so people, when they have done what they wanted to do and participate, they'll say thank you. And so that's pretty explicit feedback, And I should also say another element of structure that I've tried to do in some of the events is to be a little bit ritualistic and to do a ritual closing where I pull out my little fireball from my Genius toolkit to put a punctuation mark on the event, but it also gives people a chance to express what they want to express, which is almost always appreciation. So I think our biggest problem is, how do we get the kind of feedback to make our events better and to figure out where to go next. I don't know I don't really know how to ask that question. So it's just our own creativity and try it out and not be afraid to fail, but that kind of thing.
Thank you. Ruth? What do you think?
Well, so I guess maybe to complement some of what I've heard here, and Cathy, I don't know if I ever get to be a fly on the wall at one of your events, but they just sound like really mega organized and interesting. And then the improv thing, I'm just like, wow, can I just watch you? I would say like feedback is an ongoing process. So if I'm really surprised at the end of any of the events I'm holding about feedback I'm hearing, that's even more momentous to me than anything else as far as understanding that I missed a thread. There's the unique appreciations, but then there's also the irritants that can happen in physical reality and virtual reality. And I'm trying to create a space that's ongoing, including, reaching out to my audience and having those connection times so that I'm getting some tone of voice and I'm getting some response time. Like if I engage with somebody who seems to be nodding their head, and then they're consistently, multiple people are taking a lot longer to reply, that's feedback also. It's the lack of feedback, but something else is going on. So by the time I usually get to the end of my events, I often feel like, we are all pretty familiar with each other, and I don't do huge events. And I haven't done super structured events in here where there's an agenda and you have to learn things, etc. yet. So when I've done those in physical reality, you're kind of bound by the PowerPoint, so to speak, a little bit more. But yeah, I think that feedback is an ongoing process for me, at least. And I believe that at the beginning and end of any true meeting of human beings, there is some type of gratitude and appreciation. So it doesn't have to all be positive, but it's an evaluation of, I started here, I want to get there. That's the beginning. And I'm grateful to be here and working towards that. And then at the end, I started back there and I'm here. And something about this process has shifted me. And so often we'll have gratitude as a side effect. I do want to mention that I trust, and it was interesting listening to you, Tom and Cathy, because I'm realizing I've never thought about this, but I trust feedback immediately after an event a little bit less than I do if it's a follow-up later on. There's often a lot of momentum building towards the end of any kind of event. And so there's a lot of kind of like free flow in love. I really, really value feedback when it comes to me later on in written form, as just bumping into each other, whatever. If it's impacted somebody enough to remember and them wanting to bring that up, that is really valuable feedback to me. And then the last piece is, again, back to the world building thing. My goal with a lot of the events that I've held over there is to get worlds built differently and more consciously and more inclusively. So ultimately, feedback in that case is there's more worlds that reflect diverse cultures, and by that nature, the feedback would be more diverse people would be going into that application and staying in there and feeling safer and sticking around. So yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, man. I'm learning so much from you guys. Well, I'm going to pivot just a little bit and kind of talk about not the event, but who are the constituents, the attendees of the event. I mean, we host events publicly or privately to share the space with other people. So I want to talk about the communities that we create in virtual events. And so the question is, how do you facilitate cohesion or a common identity or purpose at your events? How do you help your attendees know that they're in the right space?
Wow. I feel like Tom is the master of this, getting people who are in virtual reality to talk about such uncomfortable things like death and letting go. So I think you should go, Tom.
Well, and this gets to the question that I didn't kind of weigh in at the very beginning is, what would you want to do next? And the fact of the matter is that a lot of the kind of 1 hour type of things where you talk about things not usually talked about, all you can do there is let someone express themselves. And that's something, that's the first step. But I'd certainly love to go beyond that and be able to have deeper ongoing things once that door gets open, and that does take a community for that. And so I think that some of the events I do are really meant to be one-time specials, and I haven't set up anything to collect the possibilities of building a community out of the experiences people have there. This is all just happening on the fly. Meditation is different. When people discover that they liked the meditation, they'll come back at that time slot next week quite often if they can. And so you can not only build a community of the people that tend to come regularly to that meditation, but then in general, are part of kind of meditation in VR, which is just, I won't go off on a long thing about this, but the mind blower to me is that there are many people who believe that this is what meditation is, having a big brick on your head in a funny world, chilling with people from all over the world. That's what they think meditation is. More power to them. I'm not going to tell them it's something else. And so we build community that way, just by the nature of the event, what it does,
Mm.
and the continuity of the time slot, which is really important to be able to be counted on that you're going to be there
Mm.
then. I haven't missed a death Q&A, a saying goodbye, or any meditation that I was registered to do for over a year now, not once. So.
Mm. Mm. Mhm.
Consistency is key.
Yeah, and so for my women IT pros, I keep it on the fourth Friday. It used to be at it later in the afternoon Pacific time, but I moved it to 9 a.m. because that also helps with some of the European, and I'm getting much better foot traffic. Also, now that they are, it's easy to make things main events. I've put them up there, so I get a mix. I get people who come to the other non-VR women IT pros meetups that I run. I do those on the second Friday, and that's done in teams as a more traditional speaker kind of thing. And I'm very active on social media, and developed a lot of network in the IT pro community. So those people will come in, and often for them, that is their first VR experience, and they're coming in, many of them in 2D. But then I also meet people. I love going to Andy Fidel has the meetups on 1:00 Pacific time Wednesdays for the women in XR, and I love that
Mm.
meetup. And so some women that I've met there then come to my Women IT Pros meetup. There's another XR Women event that happens in Verbella on Wednesday mornings, and so some of the women that I've met there will come to my VR meetups as well. So it's kind of like just a women IT pros community in general, which includes allies, because I definitely have some men who come to them, and always really appreciate having guys come in. Then because it is a main event, I do get just some random people dropping in, and sometimes they are random rude people. And I do want to give a shout out to Laurel and Educators of VR, because I went to one of the Event 101 classes way back last year about this time, and I learned so much at that, and especially about the different types of moderation and the different types of behavioral correction. And so I've been able to take a good kind of medium stance on that one, and really do try to welcome everybody in and give them a chance to correct their behavior. But if they go over that line, then bam, they're out of there. As far as my professional events, that's a little bit easier, because we usually already have a community established. I have my MVPs, or I've done things for my product team, or for a larger engineering organization. I did one meetup for other people at Microsoft who also run customer programs like I do. And that was interesting, because it was a Christmas meetup, and so we just get together from all of our different groups and kind of share knowledge about how we're doing customer things. And I finally managed to drag about 7 people in, and now 3 of those people are total VR converts, and they're doing a whole bunch of stuff with their communities. But again, they already have their community, and now they're just trying to bring all of those people into VR.
Beautiful. Thank
Wow.
you. Ruth, I feel like you're going to show us the other side of the coin here or something.
Well, it's so striking to me that there's these details that just have to do with the structure and the rhythm and the ritual. And I just, maybe it's as a complimentary piece, but it's also just, I'm noticing my body right now, and I've been holding my breath, trying to absorb everything you're both saying, because I don't think about that stuff a lot, but also I don't think about that stuff a lot. When I'm talking about cohesion of a group, some of what I've already mentioned is that idea of body language, but I don't know if anybody here does this. I sometimes wonder how, gradiently non-neurotypical I am, but I hear tone of voice so frequently, more like a musical flow, than I do the content first. And same with music on the radio. When I hear music on the radio, I'll have to listen to a song 20 plus times before I actually hear the words in it, if I'm just listening. And so I've always considered that something I was ashamed of or I hide. But I think in group settings, when I'm having responses, I'm listening to those tones. So if I'm talking to someone on this side of the room, and then somebody on this side of the room talks next, and their tones are kind of harmonizing, that's telling me about cohesion. If there's an attempt at crosstalk in a way that is actually more confrontational, or using language like the word but, or if then, or using the word think a lot, any groups that stick with me for a long time learn, just because they'll see me flinch in one way or another, to just look for why we use the word think so much and see what we can replace that with. Not a black and white rule, as most things are not black and white rules, but it's just a piece of, we do a lot of head stuff, and having a brick on our heads, like Tom is saying, is going to make us almost disassociate from that congruence piece. And if we're not in cohesion with ourselves and our bodies and our needs and feel comfortable voicing that, then we're not going to be in congruence with each other.
Yeah. Drew, let me just
Yes, Tom.
let me build on that just a bit too, and say that that I think that it is all about how you build a community in events, because there are always going to be people, just due to the way our society works, who are going to talk in a certain way that is going to make universal claims. You know, they're not just going to talk about how they're feeling; they're going to say how it is. And as soon as someone tries to say how it is and persuade others in their way is best, the community becomes really full of discord. And so, but that's the one that I hear. So that's the language I'll go for. And really, just in a matter of fact way, as soon as someone starts to go, well, it's like this, or however they'll say it, I'll just say, actually, you know, what I've learned is it doesn't work so well when we talk that way. Just tell us what you think. Tell us what you feel about it. Just that simple. And I have a pretty good batting average on that, turning stuff around, and then everybody hears that. Oh, that's the way this community is. I can say whatever I think. I just can't try to talk someone else into stuff. I get that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. That reminds me also of, as a facilitator, paying attention to you language. Sometimes when I'm overwhelmed inside of me, and I'm a participant, especially, and I don't feel okay saying I believe or I think, I'll say, you know, when you do this thing and then you feel this way, then you're going to do this other thing. And I'm paying attention for that language, because if we're using that language, we're doing often some kind of cross projection, you know, enmeshment sort of patterning that can get tangled pretty quickly. When people say you to me, I have to sit there and slow down in my head and go, okay, I question mark, do all those things fit with me? And it's exhausting. So as a facilitator, I'm trying to model for people to just notice, you know, what am I feeling in my body right now? What do I want to really say here? What's the simplest way to name it? And yeah, Tom, I think you have a lot of you know, I'm noticing, I said, think, I feel your wisdom in so much of what you do. You're concentrating a lot in a very little amount of what you're saying.
You know, I'll just
Okay.
add to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Saying about,
Please do.
I gotta say, I have an advantage that other people here don't have. And since you're saying all these nice things, I've got to confess it. And I don't know how to, you know, make good for people, which is that I don't have to be doing this. I'm, and everybody knows that. I always introduce myself as a semi-old guy who's not making a living. I'm not trying to create a brand. And so that is just off the table all along. And how other people can kind of make that separation between, like, I'm really here as my authentic self, but of course I have to be making a living. That's a tough one, a real tough one. It gives me a super advantage, and I'm aware of it.
Thank you, Tom. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming near to the end of the event, and I want to get some time for questions in. But there is an extremely important topic that I would love to hear your individual strategies for. We had a little sample of it earlier. Is what are the ways that you address bad actors that may appear in your events?
Well, mine's
Cathy, why
pretty
don't you
simple.
go?
Yeah, I for the Women IT Pros, I use the gentle moderation, but definitely prepared to kick people out. And I didn't realize till the first time after I kicked someone out that as I'm duplicating my event, it preserves the kick list. So yay, whoever thought of that one. You know, that's been good. And I give a lot of people moderation rights at my events. You know, I'll hand it around pretty thoroughly to anybody that I know and trust a little bit. Business events haven't had a problem yet because, you know, it's just expected that everyone's on good behavior. It doesn't always, you know, turn out that way, but I do believe it's important to post a code of conduct. I'm required at Microsoft events to post a code of conduct for any event, in person or digital, in any form. So, you know, we always do that, and, you know, always try to make it really clear, you know, even if we're just doing something in Teams, what the standards of behavior are. And by stating that up front, I think that also helps.
Well said. Well
Yeah.
said.
Well,
Ruth,
go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Ruth, because
Tom.
I want to take it somewhere else too. But let's hear what you say about that one, Ruth,
Oh,
because you're in the
sure.
middle
Yeah.
of it.
Well, actually, Ruth, I believe you, in some cases, look forward to conflict at your events, if not literally. So tell us about your approaches.
Yeah, well, and um, I just feel it's like, again, so humbled to be up here because in AltSpace, I'm relatively new to especially hosting public events or being a part of that. Um, I know that when I've gone to events in AltSpace that have bigger crowds or whatever, I feel a sense of loss and increasing boredom when things happen, no matter what kind of event it is, when things happen that are disruptive and they aren't acknowledged and there's not love or compassion put around them. Even if somebody is being so crass or verbally diarrheaed or however we want to say it, that they're going to be kicked out and they know they're going to be kicked out and whatever. I think my heart hurts when that happens and it's not acknowledged and it's not almost for the budding trolls in all of us who want to see what happens after we get kicked out of the room. I want to talk to those parts inside of us that hate Microsoft and think that it's evil and the devil or Apple or whatever it is. I want to set up a connection with you so that if you're tempted to go there, you have another route with me. Um, and I believe that there's an ongoing conversation we can have about that. I look at disruptive or conflict events as a friend instead of a sign I'm doing it wrong. And there's a gradient there, right? But I do believe that there's courage even in corrosive behavior and that there are opportunities to rehumanize what's happening and keep that person from maybe becoming targeted in some other event. That we are all suffering our own complex stories in our lives and we don't know what set up even what happened today, but really trying to not just chop people out and also set good boundaries and learn how to do that. So especially with the kiddos, I think that's the most harmless kind of troll. The younger they get, the more confused they are, and the more, there was a kid in a space recently that was just sticking objects in people's heads and really wasn't about them trying to anger anybody. It was them trying to figure out where we were as human beings. And when I address that by just naming a feeling of I feel anxious when you do that to me, even though they hadn't yet, they had a really appropriate response to that correction or feedback and settled down immediately. So I think we all have those kids inside of us that are, it's very safe to act out in VR. You don't get dragged out with handcuffs or, put on some uh, screening list for cameras or whatever. And so people try things in here. And my hope is that whatever the experience, we can practice trusting that we'll grow from it. And that if we set that up as a premise and everybody who comes to my events and keeps coming back knows that it's a strange day if I don't use an experience coming in to grow all of us. I believe in that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, Tom, take us somewhere else.
Well, yeah, I want to segue into your last question, and I'll do it fast because I know time's wasted. You want to have some questions. Your last question had to do with what we've learned, and I'll try to kind of talk about the trolling too. And the biggest thing I've learned is how much people want to be heard. It's really that simple. We can talk about what we're doing as hosts and facilitators and whatnot, and it is important, and we got to get it just right. But what we're trying to get it right for is for people to be heard because they don't have a lot of chances, and they can't necessarily express their real stuff in their real life because there's too many other dynamics and too many constraints. So they can't believe it. They can actually say it here, and we're just setting up a chance for that to happen. And so that's usually a pretty healthy thing. And we can take that and we can meet it and do good things with it. Sometimes, it's a spectrum. And sometimes the way that people have decided that they need to be heard is something that needs to be bounced. It can't be in our society, so I have to kick them out. And I won't go in it, just like Ruth says. I mean, it's a really quick thing. You got a couple of seconds to judge. Is someone making a mistake? Are they really, trying to be disruptive? What's going on? Another quick thing I'll throw in there too is that just like I've learned that people like to be called on, I also have learned that people like to be moderators. Some people wouldn't want to be the host of an event in a million years, but being the moderator, that when they've learned, okay, it's 2 seconds. I've learned about working with Tom. He'd want me to kick this guy out now. Bam, that gives them a meaningful role too. So I think those are the ingredients, but putting it all in the framework of this is just people wanting to be heard, really, most of which we can incorporate, some of which we have to be sure we have little things in place to deal with otherwise. So,
Yeah.
Beautifully stated, and it does lead into kind of the last question that I wanted to pose to the panel here, which is, would you share a brief key lesson that you've learned from hosting virtual events? Be something that the audience members here can either think to incorporate for their own events or as a hard-won negative truth.
I mean, I would say, because we have these bricks on our heads, if you notice that and if I notice that I am uncomfortable in an event and I don't feel like I can leave, like leaving is rude or wrong or bad, or there's something amiss, I'll notice that in my body first. Like I'll just start being distracted or thinking about other things I need to do. And there's a very quick step to go do those other things in virtual reality, which is to pull the headset off and just disappear. And oops, my headset died. I've been penning out an article on oops, my headset died as a code for something got really awkward and I didn't know what to do with that. And so I just went away. And how often I see that happen, especially in established, more mainstream cultures. I believe it's really important for us to still say goodbye anyways and keep those relationships closing well, because if they don't close well, they're going to open less and less consciously, and then they're just going to become not relationship. They're just going to become connections of convenience. And while there is something to that, there's not enough to that. We need relationships we know we can reach out to and have somebody reach back.
Thank you. Cathy,
Yeah.
any
I would say
closing lessons?
Yeah, I alluded to these before, but just to kind of pull them out again. If you bring people into VR for the first time, they have no other experience, and it's specifically to attend some kind of an event, you got to meet them where they are. You start with something that they're going to be comfortable with so they can get in, or they have a help desk they can go back to. And then it just has to be something that's really compelling content. Otherwise, it's not going to get them over, whatever hurdles they have to do to try this very new experience.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I'm going to turn the hand raise on in just a moment, but before I do that, will you please join me in a great round of applause emojis for our panelists, Ruth Diaz, Cathy Moya, and Tom Nickel. Thank you both, all three of you, very much for being here. And thanks to the audience members. Thank you all for being here. All right, boom, do the thing. It's come first serve. You can, of course, ask a question to the entire panel or somebody in particular. And we have person. Let me give you the on-air and megaphone. You should be on air now, person.
Yeah,
Great.
no,
We hear you.
I'm one of the people that goes to a lot of Tom's events, and when originally coming into Altspace, his uncertainty events were probably where I spent the most time right early on, just kind of learning what Altspace was. That was kind of because before that I had mostly just used it for watching basketball games. But his uncertainty events were really what brought me in, and then was the beginning of and then brought me into the rest of things with Evolver. And it's just so interesting here, all the different tribes that you have. Like you have the VR church group, then you have the educators in VR group, you have it's just but you know what, Tom, this is more of a comment than a question. You know what my absolute favorite event that you ever ran was? The Valentine's Day tour of San Francisco. Because that was one where my wife was able to join. And speaking of Cathy, we were talking about how it has to be really compelling content to get to non-VR people in. my wife is a non-VR person, and that Valentine's Day event, that was some compelling content that day.
Hmm.
Because she
Thank
did
you.
that with me, and we did the Valentine's Day tour of San Francisco together.
I remember her being there
Probably
well,
my
person.
favorite
I
thing that
remember.
Tom's ever done was that
Mm.
tour of San Francisco.
360 pictures. Yep.
That's sweet.
Right on. Thank you very much, person. I really appreciate you sharing it, and thanks for being a member of our community.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Hand raise is still open. We're at 5 o'clock, so I think that I'm going to be wandering around the space here. I've got at least another 15 minutes to hang out. Donna, if you wouldn't mind releasing the microphones to everyone. And I want to say thanks everyone for being here. Again, Educators in VR, Virtual World Society, and all of you being the audience for our virtual events. Thanks again.
Drew,
And I'm sure I'll see you around at a bunch of different things. Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
so everyone here should also know that Drew it took one for the team and was an energetic host and let us all
Yes.
speak. He knows as much about hosting events in VR as all of us
So
put
true.
together, and his company is based on it, and he's had experiences that no one else has had. So
Yeah.
thank you for how you played this role, Drew,
Yeah.
and I hope you get to sit here and dispense wisdom later on today or tomorrow or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Brilliant,
It was my pleasure.
brilliant event host. And also, yeah, if you have events, Drew is great at holding the hand and bring the anxiety down.
Skilled professional.
That's high praise. Thank you very much. All right.
Yay.
All right. Well, hand raises are
Okay, Drew, are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Are we good? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much to everybody for coming. Drew, thank you for putting together such an amazing panel. So appreciate that. Ruth and Cathy and Tom, it was so great to have you on the stage as well. As an event producer myself, I respect all of you for what you do. And so everybody, let's just give them another round of applause, okay? You guys got words of wisdom, little gold nuggets today that you can take out and host amazing events based on what they've shared with you. I just want to say on behalf of Virtual World Society and Educators in VR that we're so thrilled that you came to this event today. Now, this is part of UniVirtual experience, which is actually a 30-day experience, goes from May 1st to the 30th. Now, we've had a couple of days. We had the opening yesterday. We had events today. Now, starting this during this week, we will be populating the Educators in VR. We're doing it as quickly as we can. We have approximately 150 events spread over 18 platforms. And so we will be populating the calendar with a bunch of events. I've actually got 6 or 7 people waiting in queue for their events to be added, like find dates and times to add to include with our conference. So keep checking the calendar at educatorsinvr.com, and we will keep slotting them there, as well as AltspaceVR. You know that you can go to Educators in VR channel. That's always a great place to go. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and then you can select events there that you'd like to go to. We'd love you to select every one, but obviously that's not practical. And so select the ones that you can make. And what you'll get is 1 hour before the event happens, you'll get the regular AltSpace reminder for the event. Okay. So again, you guys, thank you so much. I just got so much from this panel, your discussion. So thank you. So I am going to officially unmute mics now.
Okay. Great.
Thank you so much.